Hello, our friends, Evolutionary Energy Arts family.
And happy day to all of you.
Cindy's happy.
I am having a happy day, yeah.
Did you know why?
Well, because I hope we finally got this dental thing kicked in the butt, which is really miraculous because when he went in there to fix it, the root was trying to barricade itself off from the decay. Like the root made its own wall and tried to hide
of calcium
and tried to hide behind that wall to save itself. And so that makes me a little bit sad because he had to go in and get the root out anyway.
So Cindy is basically 2 root canals and more work in, and she's just thankful that she's out of pain. Yeah. So how many of you guys have seen the movie The Free State of Jones? This was a good movie that I started to watch years ago, and the first scenes of it were so brutal that I had to turn it off, because it was pretty damn depressing. But you know what? War is depressing, and this was the Civil War. And so the movie starts out with a battle that's occurring around Hattiesburg, Mississippi. An area which we now know very well, as we spent quite a bit of time over in Hattiesburg in Mississippi. And there was a reason why we were also jumping between, say, Mississippi and Texas. And, many of you will guess right off. And if I threw into the mix Florida, then I think you probably get a picture of perhaps why we were staying in certain areas. Well, the Free State of Jones. There's Jones County in Mississippi, by the way, and this is based on a true story. This is towards the end of the Civil War, and certain people realized that they weren't really fighting so much for freedom as for other reasons, profits, namely, and it really did get into the fact that again. The powerful, the rich, the mighty, the powerful, use humanity like pawns, with no real regard for the consequence of the average person. So what happens is you have some deserters that join together with some slaves and others, and they take advantage of the topography, and they know the bayou, they know the swamplands, and those are spots where people can't really necessarily get into so easily if you're not used to the areas, because for one, they're extremely dangerous, loaded with gators, even though Cindy doesn't believe in alligators.
No, there are none.
She's being facetious, guys. It's just that she hasn't seen it with her own eyes yet. But she will. Hopefully not too close and personal either. I got to keep her safe there. But anyway, they spend years out there living off the land. And, even though it looks rough and harsh, and it is rough and harsh, it is bountiful. So there is a lot of food out there if you know how and where to look. And so a ragtag group grows and takes in more and more refugees until it's basically a pretty good-sized community that ends up outlasting the war. So when we look at the states of Florida, which you guys know I've lived there and lived all over the state, Texas, and we could add to the mix Mississippi as well. There's certain things they have in common, and there's certain things the leadership of Florida and Texas has put into effect right now that is very controversial in many ways, but also being applauded by many people, especially people that value freedom, that value the authority of the individual to make their own choices in life. And, these states, by the way, these are 2 of the states, Texas and Florida, that has seen more people moving in for so many years. And in effect, Texas is the second largest state as far as population. And Florida is the third, slightly ahead of New York State now. And, it's going to keep going that way, keep growing if things go on a natural progression.
Mm-hmm. Yes, they will.
So, we have to be very careful about how and what we talk about, obviously, in this world now, as, the whole notion of letting freedom ring is not something that the powers that be, want out there. It's not something that is celebrated.
No, and we do notice that the AI does. It picks up and it learns things, and it grows and it catches on to stuff. So we've had to be like super cryptic, and we really appreciate you guys hanging with us.
Yeah, and it's so funny because on the road we were only doing pretty much one video a day. We even missed a day or two here and there. We come back, we're doing 3 videos now. We're back into our groove, doing 3 videos a day. We know the views that they show are not the real number of views because, there's no way of checking them. It's whatever they say. And yet they still keep shrinking the money where it's, because they again, this is a stranglehold thing, and they want a certain narrative. So, they will keep doing it to try to force the narrative into being what the official narrative is. But I think there's going to be a lot more people flocking to these 2 states because, as we've seen, the leadership has taken steps to ensure the personal freedoms of the individual. And, it's interesting, too, because, Mississippi did that as well, being one of the first right after Texas to take certain actions. We had talked about, and we gotten from the guides, that there was going to be perhaps a eventual division into 4 or maybe 5 segments that the country was going to end up fracturing at some point. There will be a breaking point. Now, a lot of people, we always have a tendency to think things are right now. So when we were in that period of September through January, and, what the cycle was. The word begins with an E, right, and ends with an N, right? Everybody is hoping for massive change right away. But usually things don't work that fast. Usually it takes time. It takes cycles. And so, the guides had said that a certain individual was going to look to be gone, but not be completely gone, not really. And a certain line of thinking, again, is going to, look to perhaps be snuffed out, but it won't be snuffed out. Again, it's always darkest before the dawn. And if we don't hang on, then we're not going to make it to see the dawn. I found it interesting that I just saw somebody had put this section together there, and you see Texas in red and the rest of the South, for the most part, in blue. This was not too dissimilar from what Cindy had seen one of the regions of the U.S. looking like.
Mm-hmm. That's right. It's like the middle was kind of separated off, so it feels like that the information is already out there, because I picked up on something very similar to this.
And there's multiple timelines in play. And when you're talking about any sort of prophecy or vision, there is no time on certain realms, so that makes it tough. Like we had talked about how Edgar Casey's Earth changes, many of them were predicted for like the 70s and the 80s, and it didn't happen. Or before 2000, it didn't happen. Yet now, it feels like things are really underway. But still, he even talked about them going on, and he talked about reincarnating in Nebraska, and I think he said eastern Nebraska, specifically as being his next incarnation, and the Pacific Ocean being there. So that's obviously huge. Now that he had time for around 2100. Now this map, just to give you a little inkling. I think, you had looked at this before, Cindy. Well, one of the things that hits us outright is that red and yellow in the middle there. What's that all about? Now, this is a lady, and we'll go into bigger depth with her vision, because she had a vision too. That little segment right over there, 2022 to 2024, that's starting to feel ominously real, like a real possibility. But you see, she had down that the Mississippi was going to be so big, and we just crossed it, 3 or 4 times recently, and it's not that big. We could tell from firsthand experience. And she had pegged that for 2016, 2017, and we know Casey talked about the Great Lakes and the Gulf of Mexico, joining basically. So that hasn't happened yet. And what we've gotten from the guides is, that certain, and I asked her, we were driving through, what was that town? Monroe, I think. Monroe, Louisiana. And I know that's a low-lying area that's basically, in this zone, like right over here. And I asked Cindy, what did the guides say as far as, when's this going to be underwater? And it was like a long time still, like another 20, 30 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, another 20, 30 years. It's really hard to gauge time, but, I go by the vibration they give me, and it is a ways off.
Right. So what I'm getting my point is basically there are certain things we're going to be facing. And right now, again, self-sufficiency is going to be super important because, you're going to have to make choices. And already people are being forced to make choices. Do I just go the easy route and become part of the Borg and just, go along with the system? Or do I try to resist and try to last out as long as I can? And so we felt that the best place to sit out the earth changes was over in New Mexico, southern Colorado, eastern Arizona, southeastern Utah. But when we saw how the geopolitical situation was, say in New Mexico, for instance, or even in Colorado, we didn't like it, so it felt very much like, assimilation into the Borg. So we left, and so we went to where we feel the most personal freedom is going to be respected. And because we know we still have time before the major Earth changes happen, the real major ones, where, you're going to have mass migrations of tons of people just fleeing. The thing we have to face right now is the battle for personal freedom. And so that means, being somewhere with fertile soil, with abundant rain, with, good places to grow food, and also good places that are resisting the power structure. So, that gives you some choices to go to. And there's others, too. As we know, there's been some strong leadership up in Dakotas as well. Other areas, a little bit cold for our liking. So this is one of the reasons why we've been bopping around these places that really do value the right of the individual to basically find a spot to settle for about 5 years, because things will change. The geopolitical, the wrath of the empire. This is the Empire Strikes Back, basically, time. And if we're looking at it from a Star Wars chronology, in some ways. And so that's the thing to escape. It's basically time to do this, as people are banding together into their own little free states, and finding their own groups, and finding their own place in the next timeline, which we get is going to peak probably around 2024, 2025, right? And then, hopefully we start to gain a little bit back, but, we really do have probably 10 years before the real tumbling downhill effect goes, and freedom is starting to really roll strong. There's definitely a lot of rough roads ahead, guys. That's for sure. But we'll keep being alert and being aware and adjusting as you go. There's going to always be new challenges ahead. There could be a dam that's around the corner that has been looking pretty shaky for years, but then all of a sudden something else develops, that is even more pressing. So you have to kind of go with the flow.
Yeah, you do. And, if you don't have a lot of people in your immediate area that are on board, don't let that discourage you. What we need to do is make our opinions and make our thoughts known, plant those seeds in the minds of those that are around you. So when things do start to tumble, guess what? They're going to come to you for the answers. So don't be discouraged.
Yes, so we wanted to share that with you guys. As there's a lot of things to be faced in these times, and we could see there's a lot ahead, but you are going to be able to hopefully find others that will help you develop these small pockets, these free states, these free zones, and develop a reliance upon each other. And so that's what's really going on. I mean, when you look at the situation right now in the housing market, there's people that understand subconsciously. They might not understand consciously, but they're being driven to all of a sudden go somewhere else. And that's just because there is most definitely a storm ahead. And so we're each looking for our place to ride out this particular storm that's upon us.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think pretty much we're all at where we need to be. So to start building where you're at and spreading your light, making yourself known now is a good thing.
Yeah, and we have encountered so many beautiful people all over this country, in all these different areas. There's a lot of people out there that are very awake and that have wonderful hearts and wonderful intentions. And so you can find your pockets if you look for them. So as always, guys, thanks for your support on Ko-Fi and Patreon, because we couldn't do it without you. And as always, God bless. Stay prepared. Namaste.
Namaste.